The movie starts with a pretty girl named Alicia. She's the daughter of a police officer named Mark. Alicia is getting ready to meet her dad again after not seeing him for a while because they had some problems. Despite their disagreements, Alicia's friends tell her that her dad is really famous in town. This is because Mark often gets in the news for saving girls who were taken by a Mexican gang. Meanwhile, Mark is sitting in his office because he had taken down a really dangerous gang in Mexico known as the Guerrilla Gang. Sadly, this victory cost him his wife's life in a shootout with the gang members. After wiping out the gang, Mark decided to retire from the police force. He wanted to focus on rebuilding his relationship with his daughter, Alicia. He also had avenged his grudge against the Guerrilla Gang. After getting the green light from his boss, Mark heads back home and is surprised to find a bald stranger in his kitchen. Without wasting any time, Mark demands to see the man's ID. Luckily, his neighbor and close friend, Miriam, shows up just in time to calm him down. Miriam explains that the bald guy is just a plumber. Later on, Mark arrives at the airport, eager to reunite with Alicia. Unfortunately, the reunion doesn't go as smoothly as he had hoped. Alicia still seems distant. During their journey, Mark suggests grabbing a meal, but Alicia declines, saying she's not hungry. Still, Mark decides to grab something from a fast food joint. While he's at it, a mysterious person startles him near his car. Mark cautiously approaches, only to discover it's Alicia's friend Viola. They introduce themselves and apologize for the earlier misunderstanding. When Viola talks to Alicia again, Mark overhears a guy's name that catches his interest. As they're getting ready to go, Mark asks Alicia to tell him about the man and what's going on between them. Alicia then remembers a few weeks back when a guy named John, who used to be her middle school classmate, came back into her life. John reached out to express his feelings, which he hadn't been able to do before. Once they get home, Mark tells Alicia to go to her room while he takes a shower. While Alicia's in her room, she starts thinking about the painful memory of her mom's death, how she was shot by the Guerrilla Gang until her last breath. After Mark finishes his shower, Miriam comes over to welcome Alicia, but unfortunately, Alicia doesn't respond warmly to her. The next day, Alicia heads to a traditional market to pick out some little gifts for her friends once summer vacation ends. While she's busy checking out the items, a guy suddenly grabs her bag. Alicia loses all her important stuff and feels really confused. Luckily, Miriam is there too, doing some shopping. Miriam comes to Alicia's rescue, preventing the guy from bothering her. Not only that, Miriam makes a fake report to Mark, which leads to Alicia getting her wallet and phone back right away. This saves Alicia from having to file an official report and keeps Mark from worrying too much about her, which could have led to tighter security. To thank Miriam for her kindness, Alicia prepares a dinner for Miriam and her dad. The three of them eat together in a cozy atmosphere, like a happy family. That night, Alicia talks on the phone with John. Soon after, she hears a loud noise and goes to check it out. Alicia finds her dad on the floor because he drank too much. In that moment, Mark starts talking about the events surrounding her mom's death and his regret for not finding her mom's killer to this day. After Mark falls asleep, Alicia stumbles upon some old photos and newspaper clippings that have info about the shootout between her dad and the Guerrilla Gang, which happened on the same day her mom died in that incident. The next day, Alicia is out for a walk on the street near her home when a strange car suddenly hits her, hurting her hand a little. After her family finds out, Alicia tells her dad and Miriam all the details about the car and the person driving it. After that, Mark calls his friend Jay to find out more about the car that hit Alicia. Jay comes over to Mark's place and says the car has a fake license plate, which makes it hard for the police to trace. To cheer up Alicia, Mark takes her to a shooting range. He also teaches her some self-defense moves at the beach so she can protect herself in case he's not around. On their way home, Mark doesn't realize that someone has spread a bunch of sharp spike strips on the road. He loses control of his car and has an accident. This results in Miriam getting hurt in the neck and needing medical attention. Alicia also briefly loses consciousness. On the flip side, a mysterious man who had previously caused trouble for Mark is seen entering the hospital where Alicia is getting treated. This guy takes down a few guards before getting inside. Alicia wakes up from her fainting and suddenly asks about a person in a photo her dad has kept for a long time. But Mark gets a bad feeling and decides to take Alicia home, promising to explain later. When the mysterious man arrives at Alicia's hospital room, he finds it empty. A few days after leaving the hospital, Alicia asks Miriam for help in convincing Mark to let her go to a nightclub with Viola. Miriam agrees to help, but on one condition. Alicia has to promise to go to church with her on Sunday. Once they get permission, Alicia and Viola head to the nightclub that night. But Alicia feels uneasy because she's never been to a place like this before. Still, she respects Viola and goes along with it. Surprisingly, Viola's boyfriend and his friends pressure Alicia to inhale some drug powder. Eventually, Alicia starts feeling the effects of the drug, so she tries to go to the restroom to calm down. Seeing this, Viola's boyfriend and his friends plan to take advantage of Alicia's vulnerability and follow her to the restroom to harm her. Luckily, Mark arrived just in the nick of time and confronted those guys. The next day, back at home, Viola kept apologizing to Alicia because she'd been in a dangerous situation. Before leaving, Viola also said sorry and thanked Mark. She explained that without Mark's help, Alicia might be in the hospital right now, dealing with an attack from her so-called friends and their crew. When Sunday rolled around, Alicia kept her promise to Miriam and went to church. That's when Miriam shared some of the good things Mark had done, things nobody else knew about. Miriam thought Alicia deserved to know, so she wouldn't be mad at her dad anymore. Sometime later, Mark was getting ready to meet up with Jack when he stumbled upon a mysterious box addressed to Alicia. Without any hesitation, Mark handed the gift to Alicia without even peeking inside first. As Mark was getting ready to hop into his car, he suddenly realized that his family might be in danger from Aguero, the surviving leader of the guerrilla gang. He hurried back into the house, worried that the mysterious box could contain something harmful to Alicia. However, it turned out that the box was actually a gift from John. Mark headed to his meeting with Jad and told them about his desire to keep an eye on a guy in a black hoodie who had harmed his family. That night, Alicia got permission from Mark to meet John the next evening. Long story short, Alicia was getting ready to meet John when Mark got a call from the police saying they'd found the man in the black hoodie, who turned out to be Aguero, the leader of the guerrilla gang. When Mark heard this, he rushed to Aguero's location, putting aside Alicia's meeting with John. When Mark and Jay reached the spot where they expected to find Aguero, they were in for a surprise. Aguero looked different from the last time they saw him. To their shock, the person they caught wasn't really Aguero. He was just a guy paid by Aguero to wear a mask that made him look like Aguero. This imposter had a message from Aguero, saying that anyone trying to find him would take at least 2 hours to reach his location. Mark quickly realized that it would take about 2 hours to get to that place from his house. He rushed back home and tried to call Miriam, but she was too busy watching TV and didn't hear his phone call. Mark got even more worried, especially as he kept thinking about Aguero's message. While Alicia was at home, John finally came over to Alicia's house. As Alicia was about to open the door, the mysterious man, who turned out to be Aguero, suddenly attacked John. Alicia panicked and locked the door. Meanwhile, Miriam noticed her phone buzzing with missed calls from Mark. She decided to check on how Alicia was doing. Just as Alicia noticed Miriam's arrival, her panic grew because Aguero was right behind Miriam, and then he attacked her, stabbing her. Shortly after, Mark finally managed to reach Alicia by phone and urged her to stay calm, no matter how dire the situation seemed. He told her to hide in her room until he could get home. But Alicia was too scared because Aguero had already gotten inside the house, and it was too late to hide. Aguero captured her and tried to harm her. Luckily, Mark arrived just in time and fought off Aguero, saving Alicia. After things calmed down, the police showed up with a bunch of officers, though it wasn't really necessary because Mark had already defeated Aguero. After that incident, Mark and Alicia became closer, and their relationship got better. In the end, Mark shared a surprising secret with Alicia about how he had used her to trap Aguero on purpose, and that's how the movie ends. Moral lesson from the story is, Don't underestimate the role of a misunderstood plumber in bringing a family together, and always be careful when opening mysterious gifts from friends.